Hello everyone, One Man Gaming. I'm Nick on the side of the comms, of course, Justin providing audio, comms, and gameplay and madness, and he provides a lot of things.
Error 404.
Apparently, up until now, he suddenly has stopped responding. We'll
Yes,
have to reboot him later. Um,
later.
so yeah, speaking of later, we covered earlier in the, well, not the show, but like earlier in the weeks, the whole business with EA getting bought out by a conglomerate comprising Donald Trump's son, a Saudi Arabian conglomerate, and one other corp, which I cannot remember. I think it was like, I can't remember what they were called,
Oh,
honestly. Like, I've heard of the first two, but the third one I've never heard of before, so I cannot remember the name
yeah.
to say the least.
I mean, I've
Anyways,
only
we
ever heard
covered.
of the one.
Yeah. So we covered that a few weeks back, and sure enough, more stuff has come out as a result of it, and we thought we'd cover it because it's actually pretty important. Because yeah, it looks like this is garnering a lot more mess than I predicted it would, at least from interesting places that I did not predict it would. One I could foresee, the other one not so much. We'll get into it as the show goes on. But yeah, this is kind of a follow-up to that. So let's just get right into it. So the first article we have here is from the PC Gamer, and it says Saudi Arabia's acquisition of Electronic Arts faces backlash from game developers' petition calls on FTC, so the Federal Trade Commission, to scrutinize this deal closely. With the tagline being, the Video Game Workers Union wants approval of the deal to be contingent upon protecting jobs and game studios. So this is part of that one I mentioned earlier where I understand this half of the argument, yeah? So the whole business of Saudi Arabia getting bought, or the Saudi Arabian conglomerate buying up Electronic Arts, a lot of people are going to sit there and say, oh boy, is there going to be a massive layoff as a result of this, right? It's certainly not out of the question, right? But anyways, it begins. The $55 billion acquisition of Electronic Arts by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund and private equity firms is facing more pushback as the United Video Games Workers (CWA) union has put out a statement calling on regulators and lawmakers to, quote, ensure that any path forward protects jobs, preserves creative freedom, and keeps decision-making accountable to the workers who make EA successful, unquote. Quote, EA is not a struggling company, with annual revenues reaching $7.5 billion and $1 billion in profit each year from Ultimate Team. Anyways, where'd that come from? And EA is one of the largest video game developers and publishers in the world, the union said. The EA's success has been entirely driven by tens of thousands of EA workers whose creativity, skill, and innovation made EA worth buying in the first place, yet we, the very people who will be jeopardized as a result of this deal, were not represented at all when this buyout was negotiated or discussed. So, that's kind of what we're getting at here. Again, it carries on about how, details and whatnot. Basically, the idea here is that because of the way the deal was struck, there really wasn't much representation to the actual people working at EA. It was just kind of the suits making deals in back rooms, and then everyone just kind of get told, okay, you work for them now. So everyone is kind of concerned that there's going to be,
a lot of layoffs. And to be
a
fair,
lot of layoffs.
when a company gets acquisitioned into another company or a larger company, a lot of the time there tends to be downsizing.
Indeed. And so a lot of the, again, people are concerned here that, there's going to be a bunch of corporate restructuring, which is fun fact for layoffs. There's going to be a lot of, just creative freedoms getting taken away. We've already covered earlier in the week earlier in the shows when we first discussed this, and how since Saudi Arabia has a bit of a thing, to put it mildly, against the whole LGBTQ movement, that might suddenly start get reflected as a possibility. There's a lot of knock-on effects that comes out as a result of this deal. And so that's kind of speaking to the whole creative freedom side. Yeah, are there going to be no longer any ability to represent LGBTQ because Saudi Arabia don't like LGBTQ, to put it simply. That's one thing we covered, and again, there's also the jobs, as Justin mentioned. Due to the fact that this was a leveraged buyout, which I'm going to go into the finer details of leveraged buyout because it takes a lot of financial jargon with a lot of knowledge of buyouts, which, in fairness, I'm a bit rusty on myself, so if even I explain it, it won't be as accurate as someone else. But basically, like I said, it kind of boils down to the idea that because of the fact that this was kind of a deal that feels like it was just struck between the suits, the companies, employees didn't really get any say in it. So what happens to them is entirely up to the powers that be, and they don't like that. So yeah, to make a long story short, that's one half of the articles that we're going to discuss today. Again, full link down below if you want to read the PC Gamer article. Sound like I'm making light of it, but it's not. This is a very important thing, especially with right now. It feels like the industry is constantly downsizing left, right, and center. Acquisition, you know. It feels like everyone is now owned by somebody else at this point. And so this is a big deal, and certainly something that should be considered going forward. But again, for the sake of time and brevity, we'll just carry on to the next article. But again, link in the comments if you want to read that. The next one we go to is kind of the other side of this whole kerfuffle. And this one I kind of more laugh at than anyone else. And this one is from Kotaku, and that is that EA Saudi Arabia's buyout faces fresh backlash from senators and developers. The deal is set to net Wall Street banks $500 million in fees alone. Oh, boo!
Oh,
I don't know.
No.
Oh no, the rich people have to pay for something! The humanity!
True.
Anyways, it begins. Senator Richard, excuse me, I butchered this name, Blumenthal and Elizabeth Warren have called on a Treasury Department to hit the brakes on Saudi Arabia's private equity-backed buyout of Electronic Arts over national security concerns, including the deal giving a foreign company unfettered access to sensitive customer data. Their demand an investigation into the risks associated with the unprecedented agreement, which is expected to earn a $500 million windfall for the backing partners involved in the fees alone. So again, the $500 million expected to hit the banks, which that's their problem. Anyways, quote, "We urge you and the committee to apply searching scrutiny to this unprecedented proposed foreign privatization of a major American technology and entertainment company, and request that you provide the Parliament Subcommittee on Investigation and Senate Committee on Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs information on how CFIUS, Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, plans to ensure that the national security risks arising from the proposed acquisition may be mitigated." The Democratic senators wrote in a letter to the Treasury Department, Scott Bensant, I believe I pronounced that right, this week. So, that's the other half of this whole argument. Basically the idea that, you know, now that Saudi has pretty much wholesale purchased Electronic Arts, who, as much as I love to admit it, is indeed a big player in the games industry, they got a lot of US customer data now at their fingertips. And now, the government is saying, hey, is that a security risk?
Yes.
Because, you know, the US doesn't trust Saudi with at all. Then again, in fairness, does the US trust anyone is a fair question. So yeah, that's kind of the other end of the stick, with the whole business of the security concerns. It goes on to outline some of the sources of concern. The PIF's control, so private equity firms' control over EA's operations could extend to influencing or directing the company's design, features, and product decisions to advance the Saudi government's specific and long-term goals. And it goes on and on and on. I won't read the entire details of it for the sake of brevity. Again, link down below in the comment section. Not saying that it's not a valid concern, but again, for the sake of time and brevity, we'll, skip over a good chunk of it. In addition to asking for guarantees from the Trump administration that it investigates national securities associated with the deal and how to mitigate them, the letter also calls for information about any communications the Treasury Department had with Jared Kushner ahead of the buyout's announcement. Trump's son-in-law is one of the members of the consortium that is acquiring EA, and prior reported claimed his connections to the president would be instrumental in helping to avoid regulatory scrutiny. That's interesting. So basically they're saying, you are the president's son-in-law. The president is Trump. You're Trump's son-in-law. And you now own a $4 billion company that just so happens to be involved in Saudi Arabia. And that's, not money, please, but they're just like, okay, so there wasn't any funny business going on here where you're like, by the way, my father-in-law will ensure that nobody asks any questions about this. So, was there any kind of talk where he's like, hey, by the way, guys, I'm going to buy this company. Just look the other way real quick. And again, we come back to what the article also mentions is EA is not a struggling company, and it goes on to the CWA's business with, protecting jobs and whatnot, which is, again, certainly another side of the coin we've already covered earlier in this video. So there we are. We kind of have the kind of two sides of the argument. Technically, we have a third if you cover the 500 million windfall for Wall Street, which, as the article states, while the exact terms of the buyout are still unknown, Bloomberg reports that the banking partners involved are set to make a small fortune just from the fees associated with it. Roughly 20 billion of the 55 billion associated with the debt financed with JP Morgan associated organizing the loan. Bloomberg calls it the biggest debt commitment ever by a single lender for the LBO, leveraged buyout, for an LBO, leveraged buyout. So basically they're making a ton of money here.
Lots of money. Lots of money.
Yeah, the banks are making away by bandits because, well, let's be honest, this is a lot of money that's just pushing through the system, and they're backing a great deal of it. So, yeah. Wall Street's making bank. To summarize, the banks are making more money than usual, which is good, I think. Maybe not good.
Technically, yes. Technically, yes. Because then it means that they're not in debt and we're not in debt.
Well, technically, it just means that they're not in debt. Whether you're in debt or not is completely up to them.
That's your decisions, yes. But them being in debt doesn't also contribute to you being in debt because you can't take out your money.
Well, that's a whole other financial conversation, and this is midweek gaming, not midweek financial advice. So
midweek
we're just
financial
gaming. Midweek financial gaming. We're gonna have to addendum that onto the title. But anyways, so yeah, to summarize, banks are making more money than usual, which is good and bad, maybe, possibly, I don't know. The government is concerned that Saudi Arabia now has far more access to customer information related to U.S. businesses than probably they would want to. And those who work at EA are kind of just left holding the bag because they're kind of concerned about, well, losing their jobs. Because remember, as they themselves like to point out, EA is not a poor company. It is not a struggling company. And so if they suddenly like, oh, okay, big downsizing, guys, everyone's going to sit there and be like, yeah, no, you're not, because you don't have to. You're just doing this to cut jobs, because you're evil. Which, in fairness, is EA, so that's to be expected. I guess somewhere along the years, they changed their logo from EA Games, challenge everything, to EA Games, challenge every rule.
Everything must be challenged.
EA Games, challenge every morality. I guess when they said challenge everything, they truly meant everything, including your conceptualization of morality. Anyway, so that's kind of what we have going into the... Like I said, kind of worth bringing to your attention. We got three kind of sides of the argument. Kind of two, like I said, really just the kind of... the gaming union, the game developers union, kind of sitting there being like, are we going to have job protection? And the government, Democratic side, possibly even the conservative side, depending how that plays out. The Republican, I mean. Maybe they'll lay in, maybe not. Of them saying, hey, this is now a way more access to U.S. customer information that the Saudi government now possibly has access to. Does this have any bearing on U.S. security? And also, by the way, since Kushner is part of the deal and he is Trump's son-in-law, did he kind of ask people to look the other way? That seems what I'm getting out of that side of the story. So yeah, worth bringing to your guys' attention. What do you think, Justin?
All I think is hopefully EA doesn't suddenly go and get worse, but it's hard to tell on that front.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, as this deal goes on, we're probably going to hear more and more people's sides of the story going on. Like the article in Kotaku mentioned, the exact deals of the leverage buyout by the consortium to EA has not been fully disclosed, so the terms of the contracts haven't been fully revealed, so maybe there's something in there that'll raise red flags or lower them, who knows?
We won't know until we start seeing the signs.
Yeah, we won't know until we start seeing the signs. And again, this isn't even an immediate effect. This is going to be further on down the line. I don't think this is going to go on until I think like Q1 or Q2. I'd like to think until 2026. So we're not going to hear about... we're not going to actually start feeling, at least, I'd like to think, Saudi's influence or the consortium in general's influence on EA, if any, until much later on down the line. But again, early concerns to raise at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of where we are. And yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of this week. Hope you all enjoyed. Hope you all found it interesting. Like I said, worth bringing to your guys' attention as this goes on. We're definitely going to hear more from this whole buyout. I mean, it is EA games. Like them or hate them. I
They're the
personally hate
ones primarily in charge of Star Wars. So if you're hoping
them. Not
for
anymore. They did lose that license. They
true,
did.
I forgot about that. I actually
They did
forgot
lose
about
that
that.
license. They don't have
Literally,
individual rights.
literally the moment you went and said no, hold on a minute. I'm like, wait a minute. I remember now. They lost that.
They lost that. They don't have
Disney
individual
made a
rights
good
anymore.
choice, and
I
you
didn't
know,
give it to them.
yeah,
They made a bad choice. Then they fixed the bad choice.
they fixed the bad choice, and they put a company that wants to make actual games and make them as well as they can in charge.
They were just like, okay, you don't have individual rights anymore. Now anyone can just bid for it. They were like, hey, EA, you make the fucking FIFA games. You make a ton of money. Make a ton of money with Star Wars. And then they made like, I think 1 or 2 games over the course of 5, 10 years, and then they did nothing.
Well, they
with the
made a
license.
few games, but the problem is like very
So they lost.
few are hits, and the
Yeah,
ones
very
that
few
are
are
not are misses for very obvious reasons.
Yeah,
And
so
and the
I don't
ones
know.
that are hits but are also misses are the ones that are extremely controversial. So yeah. Battlefront.
Yeah, that is not a
Yeah.
good look. But yeah, like I said, EA Games, like them or hate them, they're a big name in the industry when it comes to gaming, especially in the sports side of things. Like I said, I joked about Ultimate Team earlier in the show, but in fairness, that is a massive
It's
moneymaker.
true. Pretty much everything sport related is done by EA.
Yeah, basically the sporting consortium or sporting games in the industry kind of is divided up until for very recent years between two companies, Take-Two and EA, and what things Take-Two doesn't do, EA does, and vice versa. So things like Ultimate Team, and then Take-Two does like I believe racing or not
They
basketball.
Yeah, Take Two does specifically basketball.
They do basketball, they do hockey, I believe. No, I think EA is hockey. Again, I have to check. But like I said, it's divided between those two. So now half of the pie of sports has been given over to this consortium. And like
Yes.
I said, love them or hate them, they got a massive influence in the industry, one way or the other. So we'll have to see where this goes. But yeah, hope you all enjoyed. That's the show for this week. And yeah, we'll see you all next week. Hopefully more happy news or happy news in general. Don't think this is happy,
To be
especially with the
fair,
big
to be
company.
fair, for the track
Mhm.
record, this has actually been not too bad thus far.
True. We have done
We've
way worse.
had some very distressing and unhappy news every so often, and this is better news than other times.
Before we sign off, I will say, for the sake of that, full disclosure, my original plan for this week was to go over the Warframe, the new update, talk about the teacher quest, or maybe even talk about Destiny and that whole kerfuffle. So we definitely would have been on track to do depressing news this week had someone not brought this to my attention, which is unfortunate for the gaming union. Don't get me wrong. This is unfortunate. I hope the game
Hopefully, they
employees
don't
keep their
suddenly
jobs.
start losing their jobs. Yeah.
Hopefully the devs keep the jobs, but for everyone else,
Yes.
I don't know. It's just kind of news, which, hey, it's not unhappy, I guess. So, yay, good news, I think. But, anyways, hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye bye, everybody.
Have a good one.